Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to the Antidote. Thank you for being here. It's your boy Ryan. I am on the road, as you can see. I'm in the cozy confines of your standard hotel with the corny artwork. Got to go over this shoulder. It's a mirrored on camera. Yeah, I'm out here for the National Network of School Partnerships Conference. Super excited. Had a session today. It went well. It feels good to be in a space where folks are pushing back against the insanity in the world, and searching for places to connect and be positive and hopeful together. So it felt good to be here. If you're around here, holla at me. Let's connect. We got a lot going on today. We're gonna cover a lot, so we're gonna jump right into it. And the first thing I want to talk about is the leaving mega hashtag. So if you follow me on social media, particularly on TikTok, I made a post and it went semi-viral. It's got like 250,000 views right now. But it talked about this hashtag, leaving mega. And of course, it that's pretty self-explanatory, right? It is about the number of people who have realized, like, oh, Donald Trump's a liar, and he's going to deport my wife or people that are close to me. He wasn't just going after the criminals. He said he was going to lower prices. That's not happening. All of this, right? He said he was going to bring peace to the Middle East, and now he's talking about occupying Gaza forever. So this hashtag was trending, and I said something about it. I said, I'm glad that folks are leaving Mega, and now that you know better, you got to do better. And so I want to talk about that a little bit more today because it's super important, especially given what this show does, right? Which is look for places to connect, places to build community. But that doesn't happen just because people want to connect or build community. Accountability is a huge part of relationships, of community. And so there's got to be some accountability. What do I mean by that? I mean, folks got to be able to articulate what what was it that caused them to leave, to think about what's happening differently, and then they got to be willing to act different, behave different, right? Support different causes, engage in self-reflection in ways that they hadn't previously. Um, and I think it's really important though, because in these comments, I got like, I don't know what the comments were. They're like 700 to 800 comments on this post right now. But a lot of the comments are from folks on the left, who are saying like, nah, forget that. Uh, there's no space for them in there. They got to live with it. And here's the thing that's important, right? Especially because what we do on the antidote is talk about where we can get connected and build community. We are all in this thing together. If we don't come together, if we don't figure this out together, we're all going to be impacted, right? It's not like we can say, hey, we didn't vote for Trump, and so we don't want to experience this, right? Don't deport our people because we didn't vote for Trump. That's not how this works, and we all know that, right? That's why we're so upset. That's why we're upset. Um, and so if folks are willing now, if there's a little opening to engage those people, we really have to take advantage of that. And by we, I specifically am talking to cis hetero white men, those of us that are about as far removed from the bullseye as we possibly can be, right? Queer folks certainly in the bullseye, trans folks certainly in the bullseye, communities of color certainly in the bullseye, and asking them to go and befriend or have any patience or take these types of risks when talking to people who are supportive of Trump or who were mega is not really the business, right? So we definitely need to be the ones on the front line here. And we so what that means is what my friend, good friend Christine Saxman says, loving accountability. We don't move off our integrity. We don't we don't talk about uh compromising what we're about, our values, and the world we want. But we also don't shun. We also don't judge. We don't push people away, because that leads to all kinds of problems, right? And division, um, and delays healing, and delays the work that we need to do to repair, because there's a lot of repair work that needs to happen. So yeah, that's what I want to say about that. Speaking of repair work, let's get to this next story. This is one of my favorite stories. Um, Target. So y'all know Target ended its DEI initiatives. Uh, said that essentially it's done its thing. They're good now, and they're gonna not report, and they're gonna end their programs of finding um, suppliers and businesses doing business with um, companies of color, women owned companies, things like that. They're done with that. They don't need to do it. They're gonna be good now. That was met with about as much skepticism as you can imagine. Rightfully so. Well deserved, well deserved. And starting this Black History Month, uh, community leaders in Minneapolis, that's where the company is headquartered, were they call for a national boycott of Target, which is great, good. We should think about the number of things that have brought about change in this world, and boycotting is certainly one of them. Certainly one of them. And you think about, obviously, one of that comes to mind is the Montgomery bus boycott, right? So there's a there's a boycott currently right now. I believe the number I heard was 40 days, but yeah, don't spend money at Target. The interesting part is what's happened since then. So Target's shares, its stock price has plummeted. Good, that's the point, right? That is the point of this. But what their shareholders did is super informative and super interesting. Their shareholders down in it's actually headed by I forget the name of the town in Florida, but it's its police union, pension fund, is leading the class action lawsuit, saying that Target, and they named specifically the CEO, has misled the shareholders around stock price, that they didn't disclose to shareholders the cost of potential boycotts on the stock price. And therefore, people who bought stocks recently bought them at an artificially high price. Now, what's interesting about this is that they're citing a lawsuit brung by Stephen Miller, actually, around the boycotts that happened when Target put out their LGBTQ Pride Month celebration, and the right actually got upset and started making threats, and then Target pulled them. Y'all remember this? And then there was a boycott after that, right? Like, oh, y'all are again turning your back on communities that you have stood for, or at least said that you're standing for in the past. And so they're saying this current lawsuit says that they should have known. Target should have known what was going to happen and the potential cost of consumer boycotts when they do things like this, and they're suing. Now, this is an example of what Dr. Derek Bell calls interest convergence. Interest convergence is actually one of the principles of critical race theory, which is kind of ironic because Stephen Miller and folks on the right have ridiculous temper tantrums whenever critical race theory is brought up. But this is playing out, interest convergence playing out in real life, right? When something is bad for white folks, bad for their bottom dollar, now they want to do something about it. Now, I'm not saying like, oh, that's the case this case is making. It will go through all sorts of legal iterations and articulations. But essentially, that's what it was. Is like, oh, you are you're hurting us by cutting these things, and you should have told us so that we could do something different. Who knows if they would have been like, hey, the lower stock price is fine. We don't want you putting gay pride stuff up, or we don't want you supporting Black History Month and doing some of this. I don't know. We don't know if that's what would have happened. But what we do know is that there's been backlash when Target ran away from those things. And now shareholders are saying, wait, you're hurting my bottom dollar. You're hurting my money. You're in my pockets. And that's a problem, right? That is convergence, right? And Dr. Bell talks about this. And he says, okay, that's how change happens is you find the spot where white folks and communities of color's interests converge. And that's how change will happen. Here's the thing about interest convergence, though. When that happens, it's not sustainable, right? It doesn't happen because we as in white folks have grown, have expanded our worldviews, we have come to an understanding of how standing up against systems of oppression is good for us, how that leads to our own survival. None of that is the case. That's not why people are joining this. And so it's not sustainable. And the uprisings and the retreat from DEI that has happened since the uprisings demonstrates that. That's also the case of interest convergence, right? When it becomes a burden, when push comes to shove and you really got to be 10 toes down about what you believe in, now it's shaky. We don't know where you're at. We don't know what's going on. But this is what our anti-racism has been built on. This is what our systems of justice have been built on. It is doing that, and it moves the needle in the short term, but we got to invest in people to move the needle in the long term and to move the floor up. That's really what this is about, right? Moving the floor up. Right now, that floor is crumbling beneath us, as we can see. And so it will be interesting. It will be super interesting to see what happens with Target, to follow this lawsuit, to see what articulations come out of it. How do they actually discuss issues of identity? How do they actually discuss DEI? All of those things. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. It's wild out here. It's wild out here, y'all. Let's move before we move any further. Another thing that happened and just popped up on here is Irv Gotti passed. 50 Cent is savage. He said when he found out that he was on life support, he said, "Damn it, I wish I wanted him to see my new shows." I haven't seen what he posted now that Irv has actually passed. Let's not forget that Irv Gotti, we can celebrate him. Murder Inc. is a record label that changed hip hop and left its mark on hip hop. So we can acknowledge that. We can also acknowledge that my man was doing some pretty wild things. And so yeah, hold both things, the both end, right? Be in community with each other about it, hold the both end. Felt like that this is a spot to say that since we talk about community here on The Antidote. All right, y'all. Let's move to a hugely important story. Hugely important story, which is Donald Trump saying that the United States of America is going to develop, quote unquote, do a job in Gaza. Called it the soundbite that you've undoubtedly heard is called it the Riviera of the Middle East, and made all kinds of outlandish claims. It's been a couple days. Thank God that didn't happen just yesterday, because I won't even know what to say, or how to make any sense of it, because it's just so ridiculous, right? So there are lots of places where I want to dive into this story and think about how do we capture holding people accountable and telling the truth about what's happening in Gaza and what Donald Trump wants to do there, but also being in community and not falling into the "like I told you so's" of that situation, right? So first and foremost, there's lots of people on social media and in real life and on the news that are like, yeah, see, this is what happens when you elect Trump, and fucked around and found out, and now here we are. and Kamala Harris would not have done this, would not have um, supported this level of violence and aggression and colonialism in Gaza. And I think that that's probably true, right? Uh, Kamala Harris was not a free Palestine advocate by any means. She was tepid at best on a ceasefire. She at one point called for a temporary one. Um, I don't remember her ever saying anything about the settlements or Israeli aggression in any meaningful way. And I don't think anybody would seriously think that she would say the United States is going to own Gaza and create the Riviera of the Maya. Nor I don't think anybody would seriously make the argument that she would have let or supported Israel going in and keeping permanent settlements and developing it and annexing, essentially annexing Palestine and Gaza. So there's that, and that's the truth. And bringing all our stories full circle, one of the main groups that is leaving MEGA is an organization that were called the Arab Americans for Trump. They have now changed their name to Arab Americans for Peace because obviously what happened, Trump just said, yeah, Palestine is no more. Said, made all the comments about the Palestinian people that he made and has claimed ownership of the land. And so they're not supporting him. Good. I'm glad they're not. That's a good thing. And there is this moment where we can say, like, yes, he told you so. But again, that's not helpful. That's not going to save a Palestinian life. That's not going to stop the expansion of the settlements in the West Bank, which are expanding right now. The violence is going unchecked largely in the West Bank. It's increasing and going unchecked. And of course, Gaza is in shambles, and there's not a lot of space for rebuilding there. So how do we engage with this tragedy and in a way that keeps community intact? Well, first and foremost, and holds people accountable, right? Accountability is the glue to relationships and community. So first and foremost, we gotta talk about the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu was at the White House while he has an arrest warrant, an active arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. Again, this is where whiteness comes into play and Western thought and the arrogance of Western thought, and which is rooted in, let's do this deep dive. It's rooted in liberalism, small L, right? Like liberalism, the liberal thought, like one person, one vote, oftentimes cited to John Locke in the social contract. But the people that could enter into the social contract were Europeans, particularly English folks, British folks. And so the social contract, as Charles Mills talks about, is really a racial contract. And so we got to start there, right? Like, though that's the part, is that when you see whole people as not human, as clearly Trump and Netanyahu see Arabs and Palestinians as less than human, what are we going to do about that? How do you hold people accountable to that? Well, one, you have shows like this and you have conversations like this because you hold them accountable through community, through what's called communal accountability. The failure here isn't that Trump believes what he believes and that he can go about dehumanizing folks. It's that he has the power to dehumanize folks because so many people are socialized and succumb and are formed through that lens, through that worldview. I talked about it last week, the worldview of Western political thought, which turns everybody in creation into an object. Science then is the pinnacle. We rationalize our objectification and adherence to science, and our pinnacle is technology, right? And growth and consumption, all in the service of consumption, which gives birth to the capitalist economic system, which of course gives birth to white supremacy, and the idea of whiteness in the American colonies. So all of this is wrapped up into right now Donald Trump talking about creating the Riviera of the Middle East in Gaza, where people live, where there's an indigenous population fighting for freedom and demanding their homes, and saying, hey, we just survived a genocide that's paused. It's not over yet. Let's be clear, that genocide is not over yet. We've just survived this genocide. We're living through this genocide, and we want our place back. We want our homes back. We want to return to our land where our ancestors and our family are at. Let us bury our dead. All of these things. But Trump and Netanyahu, because of whiteness, do not see them as do not see them as human, do not see these things, right? And so then it becomes easy to say, oh, Palestinians are living in hell and it's rubble and all this, and ignore the fact that the person right next to you has an active arrest warrant for creating the hell that you have just described, right? That didn't just happen. Palestinians didn't do that to themselves. That happened because of the war criminal standing right next to you. So there's that piece, right? And so the people, we have to collectively, this is a battlefield of ideas, and we have to name what's going on, and we have to get to the root. The root is that Western political thought, right? The root is liberalism, small L. And not that we need to go back to the divine right of kings or anything, but we need to expand who's understood as being human in that paradigm, in that worldview, in that framework. And I would actually say we need to go back to, we could just actually get rid of all that and go back to uh spirituality, symbol, mythos, harmonium, where we understand that we're all connected by a greater being, a greater energy, whatever you want to call it, that we see symbols of that and proof of that everywhere, and we tell stories and pass down ancient wisdom that can't necessarily be entirely quantified. And that our goal is harmony, our harmony with each other and with creation. It's a spiritual process, right? It's a spiritual shift that needs to happen. And so Trump is there talking about this. That's the first thing we need to talk about. Like, where's our community? Which is again why that leaving mega is so important. We have to be able to nurture a shift in worldview from people, because that group of people are going to be the ones that hold everybody accountable. We're accountable to each other. We can't hold one individual accountable if they don't see themselves as a part of a larger community, right? And the left has done a terrible job of building community around values and principles that recognize the humanity of everybody. And that's because we live in a capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal society, as Bell Hooks said. And so, yeah, I see folks coming in and out. If you've got questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. Uh, yeah, we'll love to chop it up. But so there's the first thing that we have there. None of that is necessarily that's long term. That's not short term. For what do we do now? So right away, what do we do is make sure that anybody in a position, any politician in a position to disrupt or interrupt Donald Trump does so, does this process that they call this what it is, colonialism. This is colonialism. And it's not just Gaza, right? Like, it's important that we talk about this. Donald Trump has said that he wants control of the Panama Canal. Donald Trump has said that he wants Greenland. Donald Trump has said that he wants Canada to be the 51st state, right? All of these come with some sort of pseudo threat or implied threat of violence, of using military force to make this happen if Trump doesn't get his way, right? And so these things, we need to have patience and conversations, and we need to have as many conversations as we can with people who are drawn to this. And we need to intervene and ask questions and be curious and say, hey, I don't think that this aligns with what I've heard you say other places. Let's talk about this. And again, you should do that to the extent that you're capable. If you're cis, hetero, and white, you got to be capable. I'm just going to put it out there. You got to be capable. This is our job. This is our responsibility. We have created and nurtured and emboldened this worldview. Democrats, particularly, they adhere to liberal framework, Western political thought, as much as anybody. And so we have to make those shifts, and we have to make the shifts with the people who are open to shifting, right? Whether or not that's not a partisan issue. That's not a partisan issue. Some folks might have to do more repairs and might have to shift more than others for sure. But that's where we're at, right? So there's that. So we got to make sure anybody who's in a position to interrupt does. And I'm talking about that's the like call your senator, call your congressperson, make sure that they're doing this. Second, one of the leading edges of this is attacking free speech at universities and institutions of education, from high schools through universities and grad schools. We have to be able to talk about this. We have to call it what it is. Um, it's a genocide. It's an ethnic cleansing. There is no doubt that Donald Trump called for an ethnic cleansing. Hold on, let's see what. And so we need to be clear about that. We definitely need to be clear about that. And we have to name it, and we have to have conversations about it. Facilitate these conversations in your schools, in your book clubs, wherever you're at, right? With your families. And make so in order to do that effectively, we have to understand what's going on ourselves. So read um Except for Palestine by Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Peltnick. I believe I'm spacing on the last name. I was going to try to look it up. Super important book. There's all kinds of read The Racial Contract, read The History of White People, read, so that we can have these conversations. Um, talk to people who are skilled at facilitating difficult conversations. Check out Lear. Holler at me if you want. We need to be able to have these conversations, ask the questions, and um, focus on the process more than the outcome. Now that sounds weird to say. What do I mean? I don't mean that the outcome doesn't matter. The outcome most certainly does, but you don't get people to shift their understandings of the world and how they make sense of themselves by telling them that they're wrong and stupid and belittling them and saying, here, think like this. You got to ask questions, and people come to those understandings as they come to them, right? And so that's the important piece right now. That is the important piece, is to have people come to those understandings on their own. So we ask questions, and we have that. Now, all of this is to say not everybody's going to shift, right? Not everybody's going to. Some people are very, very invested in colonialism, in white supremacy, in capitalism, and they're here for this. They're here for this. And so once those people make themselves very, very known, very, very known, right? For as long as they are in that posture, we don't bang your head against unmovable walls, right? Here's the key to keeping community at the center of what we do is it's not that you engage and you accept where those people are at. You say when they're ready to move, we will help facilitate that growth. We will help facilitate the repair of the damage that was caused. But what we need to do right now is stop the harm. And so, what does that look like? That means there will be times when you might have to join a protest, when you might have to put your body in between police and protesters, or ICE agents and a family that could be torn apart. Know your rights, do so safely, do so in community. But those are things of how we keep community intact, right? And we do that because we care about the community. And we know that when things like that happen, we can't be good. We can't be good in this society, not collectively, with things like this happening. And that's the last thing I want to talk about tonight is this idea that not this idea. That's a weird saying. I want to talk about how important it is to acknowledge our history, and I'm saying this history of whiteness and capitalism and maleness. Um, to acknowledge the way that our country has brutalized indigenous people and the genocide that happened here. Uh, More than just land acknowledgments, but the returning of land is very important where we can, right? Read Waziyata Wins, What Does Justice Look Like? So there's that, but also um doing like telling again back in schools and telling our stories, the stories that we tell need to include that stuff, right? Like asking the questions of how have folks metabolized that? How have they healed from that? I guess that's what I'm trying to say is the other offering I'm offering here is for when white folks are talking to other white folks, and I hope that there's plenty of them watching right now. Is one of the things that you can ask people is how have you dealt with, how have you metabolized the way that whiteness has has marked our country? How have you dealt with that? We're raised in that energy. We're told we are that. We are lumped together. We are connected to that history, right? Via our identity as Americans, because that's American history. And we all have different positions in relationship to that history, right? Some were victimized by that history and they have grief and pain and terror. Some perpetuated that violence. And that is a wound that we have to heal from. And so one of the questions that I always ask when folks really start to take seriously the exploration of what it means to be white is exploring that what I call the wound of whiteness. How have they processed that? And it's not, oh, that wasn't me, so it doesn't impact me. Nah, that's not it. We are all connected to that history, especially if you want to claim American. You're American and you have some sort of patriotism. How have you healed from that? What are you doing to heal from that? How are you going to make sure you don't repeat that history? And if you're like, oh, I don't. What do you mean repeat that history? It's illegal now. I would one beg to differ, right? Look at what's happening, um, and then also look at what it means to tell the truth and to restore from those things. Um, yeah, folks. So those are the things. Those are the stories from the antidote today. I don't see no questions in the channel. Stay on for a little bit longer. Anybody got any questions? In the video, you talked about where to go. What do you mean? Where are we going? I gotta figure out how to uh, get these to pop up. We're gonna do ours. We're gonna do theirs. We're gonna up the technological abilities here one of these weeks. Um, Not sure what you mean where to go, Anthony. We're waiting. With former Mega, I see. Yeah, so that leaving Mega. I mean when people are coming and they're realizing like, oh, Trump lied, Trump did this. Again, that Arab Americans for Trump have now broken with Trump. A bunch of Venezuelans, obviously, when the Trump administration ended TPS, there was a group of Venezuelan refugees who got on the news and said, "Hey, Trump lied to us. This was not what he said he was going to do," and all that. When people present that opportunity to you, we gotta one welcome them and say, yeah, that's harmful, that sucks. I'm sorry that that happened to you, and and then we lead with curiosity, right? Like, what does it what does that remind you of? What are you thinking about as you think about what you supported and why you supported it? What's the world you want? All of these things, and then we're able to walk with them in that journey to make sense of what's happening and to plug them in into movements and groups and communities that are working towards creating the world that they want to see. Because as I've talked to more people, I realize like there's not much difference in the worlds that we want to see, right? Even I was talking about this TikTok that I had and all these comments. Most of the people on there are talking about the same type of world that I want to see. They just don't understand I shouldn't say don't understand because they're not dumb. They're overlooking that their definitions of humans and they're not aware of their socialization in many places, right? So what is the kind like definitely in Florida they feel hurt, but it's like, why would you believe him? Yeah, that's so again, accountability is not something that we do to people, right? It's a communal process. Um, and so first and foremost, accountability looks like creating the space for those people to talk about why they believed him. I don't know why people believed him. Um, I think there was lots of reason, there was lots of proof that you shouldn't have. I certainly didn't believe him, right? But I also don't think that anybody who says that they did is being disingenuous or lying about it. I think some people did believe him. And that's important to create space for and to hear why. And then again, figure out where there's the overlap. Where's the place? What values are they leading with? Where do you share values and how do you create a world that elevates those? That's the only way we move together. How do you feel? I'm trying to read the questions out loud so folks can hear what they are. And how do you feel we try to push the country left? I feel from how far right we have moved that the Democratic Party is only going to put forth another Kamala type candidate. I don't think the Democrats are how we push the country left. Absolutely not. And I'm also nah. I don't. I have some sort of feels about even talking about like the left, moving the country left. I know what you mean when you say that, or I think I know what folks mean when they say that. They mean moving more progressive, more to a radical position, and I think that that's right. But I think this idea of left versus right gets us into this binary where we can't be in relationships together. Um, oh, yeah, like it's just not. Sometimes I don't think it's useful to talk about my goals moving people left. I would talk about um, the values that I hold and the world I want to see, and look for where that was shared across political spectrum or partisanship. It's funny because so much. So take again, I'm going to come back to this leaving mega trend. So much of what I've seen undergirding that move, that the people who have moved away from that, who have expressed some sort of discontent and disappointment in Trump so far, voted for him for reasons like he's anti-war. He's not going to get us into a war. He's going to lower the prices of things. And now that he hasn't, the tariffs are going to raise prices, right? Um, Talking about colonial occupation of Gaza and potentially invading Panama and Greenland and Canada. None of that screams anti-war president. And so they're seeing that. But if I talk about that as in like, hey, I'm from the left, right? If that's my identity, that's going to shut down opportunities for conversations in a lot of ways. I'm going to stand 10 toes down on that worldview, and I'm going to challenge anybody and everybody who says that invading Gaza is a good thing, or anything like that. I'm going to challenge that to your face, and all that, but I'm going to do so respectfully. I'm going to do so in an acknowledgement of that you're a human being across from me, because that's how I keep my humanity, right? Um, and I'm not going to say, oh, I'm left. I'm a leftist, right? Um, I am. I mean, like objectively, I think my worldviews put me on the left, if that's where you're gonna put me. But I'm not. I'm not. That's not what I'm loyal to. I'm loyal to a set of values. I'm loyal to a vision of the world that I want to see, not to any abstract political spectrum, right? And so things like socialism. So this is another question: is like, yeah, like socialism being on the left. Socialism is going to shut. If you use that term, it's going to shut down so many conversations with people who believe in socialism, right? They've heard the big bad socialist communist boogeyman, the Red Scare is out here, and I can't possibly be supportive of anything like that. And yet they'll be like, "Oh, I want to donate." The fire department is what I need if they're in California, and I hope anybody if you're watching from California is okay. And getting what you need. I know that the news cycle has moved on, but We haven't, and we're sending you love. But so many things that are funded via a socialist worldview, right? The libraries, the roads, the military actually is funded through what would we call socialism. Corporate subsidies are socialism. All of these things could technically be called like socialist type funding sources and streams. They approve of that, right? So if we can start talking about, hey, I think health is a human right. Let's fund it that way. I think housing is a human right, education, all of these things. Um, and we talk in terms of values and not in terms of technical, like economic language, we're going to be able to build our base much more. Should we look at the world in an economic framework, system like capitalism versus whatever, and it feels like an us versus them? Yeah, see, that's kind of what I was just talking about. Like, nah, I'm not committed. Well, let me pause. I have studied all kinds of economic thought, Keynesian, Marxism, uh, Adam Smith type capitalism, all of that, mercantilism, all of that, socialism to communism. I'm not. I know where my values are. Again, this is a values conversation, not an economic thought conversation. I don't care what you call it. I think workers should not be exploited. I think human rights should not be commodified. Housing, health, school, you shouldn't be able to make a profit off of that. The fact that we have private prisons is wild, right? You can't. Why are we? Why? That's a whole nother thing. Maybe we'll talk about that at one time. One time on the antidote. I'm sure it will come up. But it does create an us versus them, right? Especially when we have a co-optation of those economic systems, or we so often we act like there can't be corruption even in the economic systems that are supposedly more progressive, right? There can be. There's abuse, bad people, bad actors abuse systems. Communism is a system that can be abused. Capitalism is certainly a system that can be abused. There's corruption that exists in both of those. And so again, we're talking at too high a level. We got to get to how are people making sense of how they relate to others and their sense of community and therefore accountability and relationship to others, right? I think that's the disconnect from community is the heart of all this. And that's whiteness, right? That's the shift towards object science, rationale, technology, and away from spirituality, symbol, mythos, harmonium. And we need to have that spiritual work done. Other questions? I appreciate you. We do have a lot of hundreds of years of social conditioning to undo. I'm just afraid I will not see the change in my lifetime. You know what, man? Um, we might not, right? Not at the level that I think you might be talking about. Uh, but you will see it in how you build your own community, right? These are all things that we can do in our sphere of influence. We can take care of each other. We can do we can do these things in our communities and in our family structures, in our friendships, in our schools, in our organizations, in our businesses. We all have a sphere of influence where we can operate in alignment with these values, and we need to do that now more than ever, right? um, and I get the urgency. I get how urgent it is to make some real big changes and see some real big changes, but those only happen if we're doing it ourselves, right? Otherwise, they're superficial, shallow, and crumble. And we saw that, right? We saw that after the uprisings where um, we didn't have the infrastructure in place, and so when whiteness and capitalism and all the things pushed on what we thought what we might be able to put in place, it couldn't withstand that. And of course it was going to push on it, right? Of course it wasn't going to let us abolish the police or put these things in place, community service, or community first responders, in a way that it wasn't going to nurture that. The system's not going to create space for you to deconstruct it. And we just weren't ready for that because we hadn't been practicing this in our own communities in a meaningful enough way. See, some folks jumped off. Is it worth trying to argue with people on Facebook? And that's a personal thing. I used to beat up my keyboard and all that. I don't do that as much anymore. I still engage a little bit, but I like to try to ask more questions. Like I said, I think more than I see it now more of planting seeds rather than winning arguments or debates. I think it's planting the seeds that's super necessary. If you're watching right now, I need you to hit this like button. Hit this like button. Make sure you share this. I'm still taking questions are coming in. Like I'm getting into fights with ignorance, and it hurts my head. But it's the misinformation and disinformation that's being posted. Yeah, man, you gotta protect your peace. You gotta protect your peace. Protect your peace. And again, I think um, we expect people to change. It's not about expecting people to change. It's about affirming what you believe in and offering values and offering a place for connection if somebody wants to connect with you, right? A place to have a meaningful conversation even if we disagree. um Not a place to go to war. It took me too long to understand that. It took me way too long to understand that, for sure. All right, folks, that's going to do it for the antidote this week. We'll see you back here next week. Thank you for being here. Again, if you're watching this, hit that like button, share this with your people. Super, super appreciate it. And we will see y'all next week. Peace.